right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for our Change Resilience webinar. If nothing else, this year has taught us that change is inevitable, sometimes rapid, and almost always disruptive. We can be like an oak tree and stand our ground and risk being broken, or we can be like a palm tree that doesn't fight the wind and gives and bounces back. That's what today's presentation is about, change resilience. So I wanted to start by giving everyone a quick overview of AVAP. AVAP is an industry-focused, cross-platform management and technology consulting firm. We are the only authorized ProSci change management training partner in the United States. With offices across the US and around the world, AVAP has deep expertise in education, government, healthcare, and manufacturing, among other industries. Organizational change at AVAP focuses on successfully navigating organizations through change. We get leaders aligned, employees ready, and partner with you to achieve your goals. We're joined today for this webinar by my colleague, Noelle Akins, one of our senior consultants in organizational change management, and she's president of Akins & Associates, an executive coaching practice based in Northeast Ohio. Noelle brings 20 plus years of talent development and change management experience to this conversation. Her experience is rooted in a strong educational background in the science of behavior change. Today, she'll share with you several foundational principles for fostering change and will overview 5 keys to resilience as published in the popular trade magazine, Training Industry. Before we get started, I would also like to note that today's webinar is interactive, so we will be using the chat and polling features of Zoom. Also, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to send them through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and Noelle will answer them at the end. So thank you again for joining, and we hope you learned something that helps you as you continue to develop and enhance your resilience. The floor is yours, Noelle.
Thank you, Vanessa, and welcome. Welcome, everyone. There is hardly a topic I can think of that is more relevant today than the speed of change. Think for a moment about the amount of change that we have all seen in 2020. We've all been on a forced pause, right? COVID has changed an already VUCA marketplace. It's already been volatile and uncertain and complex. It's even more ambiguous now. And so we need new leadership skills to be able to accommodate that. Our workplaces have also changed, right? Perhaps some of your operations, your processes, I'm sure even the people that you work with have changed. Many of us are sitting right next to new colleagues, our children, right? At the kitchen table as they school and you work together. And with these workplace changes, we know that employees are twice as likely to report chronic workplace fatigue. So that means that stress and change go together. I see that I just eliminated my video camera, and I think that's going to be better. I think that we have a little bit of a technical glitch, so I'll continue on without camera. We also have the work of the work that has continued to change with lots of opportunity with improvement. Opportunity for improvement, because we have about a 65 success rate when we think about our business goals. So my question to you is, what about you? When you think about change and what you've been through this year, what type of change impact is most challenging to you? Is it the marketplace and how vulnerable, volatile, VUCA it is? Is it maybe your workplace and the stress that you're experiencing, or is it something personal? Take to chat if you would. We'd love to hear comments from you about how you are personally experiencing today's speed of change. And as I pause to do that, I just want to double check. And Vanessa, do I still have audio? Am I still with you?
Yep, you sound great.
Okay, all right, fantastic. So Today, we're going to be looking at aspects of change fatigue and change resilience amidst all of this change. When we think of resilience, that's the ability to bounce back. It's the ability to recover from setbacks, the strength inside and out. So that palm tree that Vanessa mentioned that's able to sway in the wind, it's got a lot of flexibility, and it also has a lot of strength on the inside. Contrast that with fatigue. Change fatigue really is an apathy or a resignation because change has been unfocused or unsuccessful in your experience. And that can either be organizationally or it can be personally. The good news is we can do something about that. And I see in chat, we've got marketplace issues. That's a concern, definitely economic impact for sure. And the change in the marketplace, number one. And I see a question about repeating what VUCA stands for. VUCA is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And actually, Deloitte recently came out with a study on new leadership skills, and dealing with ambiguity leading through uncertain times is one of the most needed and the largest gap in terms of leadership skills. So that's a huge thing. That report came out even before COVID, so how much more heightened that would be. Another comment here is missing socialization. Wow, that's a biggie. So the interpersonal connection has completely changed, wrangling virtual learning for your child. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for weighing in, and continue to do that as we move through today. Today, we're going to talk about the personal change experience and common reactions that we all go through across the change curve. And we'll also look at some fatigue factors that will affect you as leaders and also your team. So if you're an individual contributor, this is just as relevant for you. These are going to create a foundation for change resilience, and we will give you a sneak peek to that 5 keys. We've got 5 keys of change resilience. We'll give you a link to the full article as well as a link so that you can download your personal resilience checklist for more information after this. So as we get started, I know it's lunchtime for many of us, so I'd like to start with an exercise quite literally. Now we're spread out everywhere and we can't see each other, but I'd like for you, if you would, to get on the edge of your seat. I'm going to do that right now. And what you're going to see is a list of change-related words. And I'd like for you to think about, as you see that word, what your personal response is to each word. If your response to that change word is positive, then I'd like you to stand up. And if it's negative, take your seat. Okay, there's going to be lots of words. So you might feel like popcorn, but this technically really is an exercise here. First word is transformation. Would you be standing because it's positive or seated? Overhaul. What about innovation? Standing or seated? Conversion. Positive response or negative response? Merger or acquisition? Process change. Improvements. Okay. Well, fantastic. You know, when I do this in a large group, I see people going up and down at all sorts of different times. I see them looking at each other with this face, that look on their face like, how could you possibly think that that's positive? Or how could you not think that that's positive? And it's also interesting to see that some people are standing much more often than others, and others are sitting much more often. And so what do you take away from this exercise? When you look at this, what do you take away from this exercise? I think it's really that change is personal. It's whether we find it to be positive or negative, we perceive change personally and we also process it personally. So that impacts our change experience. It makes it either easier for us or it makes it more stressful for us to process that change. Another thing to note, and that's one reason this picture is so important, is that change is not linear. If we're a leader of change, if we're part of coming up with the idea of the change and moving from point A to point B, it's easy for us to feel like it's a very linear process. After all, we're going from current state to future. But if we are literally living that change, it's not so linear at all. There's actually a curve, just like this road is picturing. There's a curve that we all go through, and it's very personal. And we go through that curve at different rates of speed. So let's take a look at that. Here's a picture of our change curve, and we're all starting over here on the far left-hand side, and the first stage is competence. This is where it's our comfort zone. It's what we know, and we are comfortable with our current state. And I will say, even if our current state is not optimal, and we know it's not optimal, we've already figured out how to operate in that, and we feel successful and we're in control. So we feel safe. This is a place where we're not really wanting to necessarily move from. It's hard to move from that. When we first hear about a change or the concept of a shift, whether it's a new program or a new software system or even new processes or a new location that you're moving to, when that idea is first introduced, we usually move into the second stage of change, which is concern. What does this mean for me? We're asking, what's the impact? How am I going to be affected? And a lot of times we're anxious about it. There's self-doubt. We have different responses. Some of us, when we're in this stage, we'll get quiet. We'll just kind of hold back and say, well, we'll just see what happens. Some of us dig in our heels. Others are very vocal. You might hear venting and concern like that. Once we get enough information, though, and we realize, yep, this change is really happening, we move into that third state of change, which is the contemplation stage. Here we're hopeful. We begin to question and think, well, you know, this could work for me. This could work for all of us. It may be difficult, it may not be perfect, but let's give it a try. And we begin to experiment. It's helpful at this stage if we can actually experience the change in little pieces. Maybe we have the opportunity to go into a lab and take hands-on experience with the new software. Maybe if we're moving to a new location, maybe we get to see what that floor plan is like, and we actually get to see the new setting and you know, the upholstery and the decorations, etc., like, you know, the layout. But what I want to caution us about this stage, it's an exciting stage, but when we begin to be hopeful and we experience a bit of that change, the very first moment that change is not all that we thought it was going to be, the first moment that, you know, doesn't work perfectly, we can easily get frustrated and move right back into concern. So just notice that this is a fluid process. Again, this isn't even linear. This curve, you could be in contemplation one day and then back to concern and then moving back to contemplation again. The final stage, though, after we've gotten our questions answered and we've gathered a little more experience, is that confidence. We have committed now to the new future, to what's coming, and we're more self-assured, especially if we've had more time in whatever that new system is or the new way of working is. And usually there's some relief there. So, question for you, and Vanessa, we'll go ahead and let's get a poll going. I want to hear from you. When you experience change, which area of the change curve is most challenging for you? Would you say it's competence? It's like actually getting out of that comfort zone. Like, I'm very comfortable and I don't want to move. Or would you say it's concern? Maybe you're a leader and you're like, I do not like dealing with this kind of resistance. I don't like when people are vocal. I don't like when they don't embrace naturally the change. So I'm very uncomfortable with that. Perhaps it's contemplation because it is very sensitive. There is that experimentation. And interesting, we even had somebody that said confidence. Let's give a 1 or 2 more seconds, Vanessa, and let's go ahead and share the results. Thank you for weighing in. Okay, let's see. So it looks like concern is the highest, and that is pretty true to form. Typically, that's what I'm hearing most people. It's just not a comfortable place to be. Confidence, there's a couple there, and contemplation. I'd love to hear from whoever said confidence. That's a real interesting one. Sometimes people will find that that fourth stage of change is challenging because really you need to continue to instill confidence for the long run. And what becomes really important there is the maintenance, it's the performance management, it's the recognition, it's the celebration of wins. So thank you so much for weighing in. I'm going to stop sharing these results and let's move on. So what if I were to say that it is not the speed of change or the quantity, but it's actually the quality of our change experience that makes all the difference? That's actually what the 2019 Change Lab survey found. Here, employees themselves strongly indicated that it was not just about the number of changes. Did you know we're actually, as human beings, we're wired for novelty. We love novelty. But what's important is how we are supported through it. So often as leaders, we have the inside scoop, or we have time to process a change earlier than our employees do. And so then when we're ready to share the change, we've already accommodated, moved through our change curve. And we're saying to employees, hey, this change is for the better. This change is it's going to be great. We'll have more information, or we'll be able to be more streamlined, or the flow will be better. And what employees hear is, oh, my world is changing. Resistance is futile, kind of like that old Star Trek clip, resistance is futile. Why? Why is our response like that so often? It's because as human beings, the way we're created, we are always scanning the environment for threats. And when I say always, I mean 3 to 5 times per second, we're looking around saying, what's our threat? And nowadays, our threats aren't the lions and tigers and bears that they used to be. They're more social threats. They're more, how are we going to be impacted by this? And when we find threat, that's what causes the drain. Those are the fatigue factors that we're going to look at next. And we'll start with an experiment. So welcome to our Change Lab. I'd like for you to take out a writing utensil. Hopefully you already have one out because you're taking notes. But if you could find a piece of paper with some white space and something to write with, literally not your computer, you're going to need a pen or a pencil. Got it? I'll give you a moment. Okay, now with your non-dominant hand, so if your right hand, with your left hand, I want you to write your name. I'll give you just a moment to do that. I'm doing it with you. Okay, what was that like? Was it strange? The experience clunky maybe? Was it a little uncomfortable? For sure, right? All right, this time we've got a part 2. This time I'd like for you to do the same thing, non-dominant hand, but this time write your name 10 times. Except if your name, the last name begins with an A or a B. Those of you that have an A or a B name, only 3 times do you need to do this. Ready? Got 30 seconds. I'm timing. Ready, set, go. All right, how's it going? Are you making progress? And I know this is challenging, but we do have to hurry because we have a lot to cover. You know, productivity is very important, so speed is important. Okay, how's it looking for you? Is it legible? To make sure that it's legible because quality really matters. And remember, the goal here is 10. We're looking to meet our mark, okay? 10 is important. All right, I think we're close to 30 seconds. So let's stop. Go ahead and chat. What was that experience like for you? Was that very pleasant? We were actually in a petri dish there for change, fatigue, change fatigue. And here is why. Let's take a look at those fatigue factors. It got worse. Somebody said it got worse. Thank you, Jessica. Your writing got worse, right? The faster you go and the more pressure that I put on you. I bet some of you probably quit halfway through. We're like, forget this. Well, we'll talk about that, because this literally, you were able to experience many of these fatigue factors here. There are 4 fatigue factors, and this is adapted from the great work of the Neuro Leadership Institute, and they studied the threats of change and how we're impacted socially. So fatigue factors, what they will do is impact a sense of stress, and they drain our resilience. And it's important for us to know this, because when we begin to understand how we're personally reacting to change, we can also build our inner resources. And if we're leaders of other people, we can proactively anticipate how the change is going to impact them, where the drains will happen. So let's take a look at each one of these, the 4 fatigue factors. How do I fit in this change? Is it fair? How much can I influence? And is it for sure? Let's look at each one of these. And as we do, I'd ask for you to think of a change that you've recently experienced. And as you do, how each of these factors relate to it. So whether it's a personal change, like supporting your kids in school differently, or whether it's a work-related change, a new protocol because of COVID or a new IT system. So do you have one in mind? Okay, let's take a look. So fit is the first fatigue factor, and there's really 2 components to this. The first one is what's my standing? How do I connect or fit with other people? And then, do I belong? Is there a sense of connection and trust with people? Am I with friends or foes? So for example, if you're undergoing like a merger or an acquisition, the component of fit is huge. And you're asking, how is this going to impact my standing in the organization? How are our divisions going to be related? Who will my new boss be? Will they understand my skills? Will my priorities be their priorities, etc.? Will those people who used to be able to champion me still have the influence that they had in the past? So when we feel triggered, and we can identify, if we know that that's what's triggering us, we can identify actions we can take to mitigate this. So in this example, we might go meet the new leaders. We might begin to crosswalk our skills for what we know the future is going to look like and what those future leaders' priorities are. So there are things that we can do. So there we go. Fit is the first one. Let's move on and take a look at the second one, which is fair. Do you know that we all have an equity meter inside of us? I want you to think about our experiment. For example, did it feel fair to set 2 standards? Those of you that had to write it 10 times versus a couple people that had to only write it their names 3 times? That was not fair. And every time that we feel something is unfair, you can count on resistance for those who feel that they've been treated unfairly. Now I want to make a note that this is not, do I like this change? Do I want this change? It's really, do I think it's fair? The decision-making process, is it implemented fairly? Are the impacts fair, or is it unfair? An illustration of how just rooted and basic this is to our very fiber, there's a TED Talk, and I'd encourage you all to just check it out. It's very humorous to watch, a TED Talk called 2 Monkeys Paid Unequally. And it's a research project. The researcher wanted the monkeys had to give a rock to the researchers, and the researchers would give the monkey a piece of food. The first monkey did that, and the researcher gave them a cucumber. They were totally happy with the piece of cucumber. The second monkey did the same thing, gave the researcher their rock, but they got back a grape, which I guess is much more desirable for monkeys. So the first monkey saw that, gave the researcher a rock again, expected the grape, but got a cucumber. And as soon as they saw that cucumber, literally threw it back and just banged against the walls and just really had a bit of a fit. So I encourage you to check it out. But the point there is that if it is that basic for monkeys, how much more for human beings? How much more for human beings? So definitely you want to take a look at that. Be careful and aware of when your fit trigger is being, or sorry, your fairness trigger is being impacted. Thirdly is about influence. And think about ways that when you're going through the change that you're experiencing, how you and others can practice influence. So this one is all about where you have the ability to choose, where you have some kind of control. Because people don't resist change, they resist being changed. And in our experiment, our little lab, you had very little influence over the way that things were going down. It was completely one way, right? Did you think that the goal was realistic or that the timing was? You didn't have an opportunity to weigh in. Did some of you quit when it got hard because you weren't really bought in from the start? It's possible that it could have gone better if you'd had some influence on how to prepare or how to practice. So as leaders of change, and even as people who are experiencing change, we want willing commitment. We want that yes from the inside out, not a sense of compulsion. We know from research that when people feel, even in very stressful situations, if they feel they've been given some kind of a choice over the matter, they experience very little stress. They're able to move through very difficult things. And the opposite is true as well. So the kinds of questions when you're thinking, is this fatigue factor being triggered? The kind of questions for you to ask is, can I influence aspects of how or when this change is implemented? Not what, maybe it's coming, it's for sure coming, but how can I influence something? Have others that I trust been able to provide their opinion? Has my voice been heard? Those are the kinds of things that are really important to consider. All right, the fourth one is for sure. How for sure? How definite is this change actually going to happen? Now, we'd already said that we're living in ambiguity, right? Ambiguity is exhausting. We're living in more and more of it. So the more that we as leaders can help people understand, yes, this is really happening, if we're sure of it, then the better off we'll be. I joined as I was leading a change management project, and I joined a project 3 years overdue, and they'd already experienced 2 failed implementation attempts. So the people I was working with had a lot of change fatigue, right? They had a real reason to wonder if this change would actually happen. And so because I realized that, we altered the type and the frequency of the communication that we made. We celebrated those incremental progress so that people would realize, yeah, this is really happening. So that's an important thing for us to keep in mind as well. So to wrap up those 4, again, a recap, the more that these fatigue factors are triggered, the more potential impact there is to our resilience. Just like a ball without air inside, these can drain the ability to bounce back. So being aware of which ones are triggered and aware of why, we can begin to address our concerns so that we can build a foundation that's really necessary for resilience. In the change that you are experiencing, I'm curious to know which fatigue factor you see triggered most. And are there any particular steps you've thought of that you can take to mitigate that? I'll give you a moment to add that to chat. We'd love to hear. Is there a fatigue factor that you would prioritize because you really would say, yeah, this one's being triggered? Oh, Beth, thank you. You said it's for sure. We've tried this one before. Okay, we've tried this before and it's been unsuccessful. Excellent, thank you. Cheryl says influence. Okay, so where can we allow people to have some say? Fairness. Fairness has come up twice. And is it for sure? That's come up twice. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So very important for us to keep that in mind and take steps then. If you're aware of it, you can, if you're an individual contributor, you can take steps to mitigate that yourself internally. And if you're a leader, you can proactively begin to think, okay, how, because I know for sure, I know that the sense of it really happening is really a question. How can I proactively lead conversations to help people understand? Same thing with fairness. How can I proactively talk about how we've looped other people in, why in the big picture this may be fair, or just acknowledging this may not seem fair, but here's why we're going with it. So being very candid, very open and honest. All right, so the good news is that we do not have to control the change. We don't have to be a major sponsor to build our own change resilience and to help our teams build change resilience. So what we're going to do in the remaining couple of minutes is very quickly take a look at 5 keys to resilience. And I want to invite you, let you know that there is a resilience checklist, as well as a link to a full out article that you can access for more information after this session. And I'll be sharing that link with you. It's absolutely free, and it will help you to set an action plan for these different resilience components. So a sneak peek here, 5 keys. The first one is choose to take charge, and that maps directly to that influence factor. Even when we don't have a lot of say over whether the change is happening or not, there is something that we can control, even if it's as solitary as our own attitude. I can make that shift. I can decide to commit. So that's a big one. Choose to take charge in some way, shape, or form. There is some kind of autonomy that you do have. Secondly, craft a growth mindset. And this is super important as we are living in this world of ambiguity. We don't all have the answers. We don't need to have all the answers, but we do need to be very agile. So a growth mindset is contrasted with a fixed mindset where we feel like we must know exactly what's next. Here we're willing to explore, to experiment, and to continue to grow. The third key to change resilience is to clarify your why. And that is very important. Man can deal with any what if we have a why. So people understand the purpose of the change. You yourself come back to what your real reason for being is, for your real reason for committing, for your real reason to doing the great work that you're doing in the organization that you're with. Clarify that and remind yourself of it. Fourthly is coach through resistance. You know, resistance is normal. It means that people care. And yes, some of us may not really appreciate or like conflict, but helping people work through that, this addresses a number of triggers. Just depending, it could be the for sure trigger, it could be the fairness trigger. So coach them, listen and respond. And then lastly, connect with others. This directly maps to the fit factor. And research shows that in positive emotional contexts at work, even when their situations are highly stressful, so I'm talking about work environments that are high workload and high stress, if it's positive emotional context, they have burnout rates that are 3 times lower than others in similar high stress work. That's amazing research. So you can do something to connect with others and make it a safe place, make it positive. What do you need? How can I help? Simple as that. All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground. We learned it's not the speed of change, it's the quality of our experience. We discovered fatigue factors that are at play that drain your resilience, and then we took a sneak peek at the 5 keys to fostering resilience. So next steps. We've got 3 steps here. I want you to address that fatigue factor that you identified as the top priority. We've got all of them represented here. So think about how you're going to mitigate that. Secondly, as you leave today, share this information. Talk about those types of fatigue factors with leaders and others so that you as a teacher, it actually connects with you and you learn it even better. And then thirdly, definitely go out to my website using this link and get your personal change resilience checklist. And there's a whole lot of bonus content. There is a free article. There's even a video that you can take a look at, a full out webinar if you're interested. So head out there. We've got a couple minutes for Q&A. I'm going to turn things over to Vanessa, and if we've got any questions, we'd love to hear from you.
Great, thank you so much, Noelle. That was awesome. So we had a few questions come in throughout the presentation, but please feel free to send any more in. You can use the chat function or the Q&A function. So let's go ahead and get started. So Noelle, in the change curve, what suggestions do you have to help people backsliding from contemplation back to concern?
Okay, as I said, it's a vulnerable time. So first of all, I think it's very important for us to listen, for us to hear what their concerns are, and then to respond to them accordingly. Again, we don't have to have all the answers, but once people feel heard and understood, even if they don't agree with us and they may not necessarily be ready to hop on board, just having that sense of understanding and being heard is a really big deal. Secondly, I think just continuing to reinforce the opportunity for them to experience the change. So whether that is the examples that I gave, like actually seeing a demo, having hands on the screen and seeing the computer themselves and the system and being in it, having testimonials, having others that you can leverage that are influencers that can speak on behalf of the change. Those are all things that can help.
Great, thank you, Noelle. All right, next question. I am a team leader, not the leader of the change. How can I best apply this info in my role?
Okay, so that is a great question, and I want to encourage you, if you're a leader of any sort, even regardless of your role, even if you're an individual contributor, you still have a sphere of influence. So it's really important. You are a leader of change. By your saying yes, by your communicating to your team, you are leading change. You may not be a sponsor, but you're, especially mid-level managers, and frontline managers, very, very important in the leading of change. So think about those fatigue factors, begin to anticipate where you think that your team's triggers are, and speak to those. So you need to get a little bit educated on what that change is so that you can speak in advance to some of their concerns, and then keep that door open. Okay, I just encourage you that we're all leaders of change, and the most important person to lead through change well is yourself. So being in touch with what's going on inside of you, where you're being triggered, and then employing those 5 keys to resilience. Super important. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Noelle. It looks like that was our last question that came through today. But of course, if you have any more questions about the presentation or interested in executive coaching, please reach out to Noelle. And then if you have any questions about how AVAP helps organizations manage change and become more resilient, please reach out to our Vice President of Organizational Change, Shannon Sims. And I'm going to put Noelle's email in the chat, and I'll also send it in the follow-up. And also in the follow-up, everyone will get a recording of today's session and that link that Noelle mentioned earlier. So thank you again so much for joining us today. We hope to connect with you soon and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. All the best in your change journey.
Thanks, everyone.